Every time I came back from visiting my parents, I found my wife wearing perfume she never wore around me. At first, it seemed like a nice change. Then, questions turned into fear, and what I witnessed through the nanny cam left me completely paralyzed. I'm sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot at 3:17 p.m. on a Thursday, watching live footage on my phone from the nanny cam I installed in our living room 3 days ago. My wife Natalie is standing in the center of the frame, and she's not alone. There's a man I've never seen before sitting on our couch, and she's doing something I can't quite process. She's spraying perfume on her wrists, her neck, behind her ears. The same floral scent I've been smelling for months every time I come home from my parents' house. But it's not the perfume that makes my hands start shaking so badly I almost drop the phone. It's what happens next. The man says something I can't hear, and Natalie flinches. Actually flinches, like she's been struck. Then she sits down next to him, stiff and mechanical, and he reaches out and touches her face. The way she closes her eyes, the way her whole body tenses, it's not intimacy. It's fear. Pure, visceral fear. And I realize with horrible, crushing clarity that my wife isn't having an affair. Something much worse is happening in my house. My name is Julian Reeves. I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to Natalie for 6 years. We met at a community theater production where she was working as a costume designer, and I was building sets. I'm a high school art teacher now, and she runs a small online boutique selling vintage clothing. We don't have kids yet, but we've been talking about it. We have a decent 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, a rescue dog named Biscuit, and what I thought was a solid, honest marriage. The kind where we tell each other everything, where there are no secrets. I was wrong about that last part. The pattern started about 8 months ago, though I didn't recognize it as a pattern at first. I visit my parents every other weekend. They live about 90 miles away in a small town called Silverton, and since my dad had a stroke 2 years ago, I try to check in regularly, help with yard work, fix things around the house, just be present. Natalie usually stays home because she's not particularly close with my parents, and I've never pushed it. It's always been fine, a normal part of our routine. But 8 months ago, I started noticing something odd. Every time I came home from those weekend visits, Natalie smelled different. Not bad, just different. Like she was wearing a perfume I'd never noticed before. The first time, it was a Sunday evening in late September. I got home around 6 p.m., tired from the drive, and found Natalie in the kitchen making dinner. She hugged me hello, and I caught the scent immediately. Floral, sweet, with undertones of vanilla and something else I couldn't quite identify. New perfume? I asked casually. She pulled back slightly. What? No. Same stuff I always wear. I knew that wasn't true. Natalie had worn the same perfume since I'd met her. A light, citrusy scent she bought from a small shop downtown. This was completely different. But she seemed genuine in her confusion, so I let it go. Maybe I was misremembering. Maybe she'd always worn different scents, and I'd never paid attention. The second time was 2 weeks later. Another Sunday evening, another return from my parents' house, and there it was again. That same floral scent, unmistakable now. Babe, you're definitely wearing something different, I said, trying to keep my tone light. It smells nice. Natalie was folding laundry on the couch. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I'm not wearing anything, just my usual perfume. I walked closer, leaned in. No, this is different, sweeter, more floral. She stood up quickly, grabbing the laundry basket. Julian, I don't know what you're smelling, but it's the same perfume I've worn for years. Maybe you're congested from the drive. Her voice had an edge to it I wasn't used to hearing. I dropped it, but I couldn't stop noticing. Every other weekend, like clockwork, I'd come home from my parents' house and smell that perfume. And every time I mentioned it, Natalie denied it. Said I was imagining things, that she wore the same scent every day, that maybe I was smelling her lotion or her shampoo or the fabric softener. The explanations were always reasonable, always plausible, but the scent was there, consistent, undeniable. I started paying closer attention to other things, the way Natalie seemed on edge when I got home from those trips, the way she'd shower within an hour of my return, even if she'd showered that morning, the way she avoided prolonged physical contact for the first few hours I was back. I told myself I was being paranoid. That stress at work was making me see patterns that didn't exist. I'm an art teacher at a Title I school, and the job can be overwhelming. Budget cuts, overcrowded classes, students dealing with trauma I'm not equipped to handle. Maybe I was projecting my anxiety onto my marriage, looking for problems where there weren't any, but the perfume kept happening. December came, and with it, the holiday season. I visited my parents the weekend before Christmas to help decorate and do some shopping. When I got home Sunday night, Natalie was in the living room wrapping presents. The scent hit me the moment I walked through the door. Stronger this time, almost overwhelming. Natalie, please just tell me what perfume that is, I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. I'm not judging. I just want to know. She looked up at me, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Fear? Panic? It was gone so fast I couldn't be sure. Julian, I don't know what you want me to say. This is the perfume I always wear. If it smells different to you, Maybe you should see a doctor. Maybe something's wrong with your sense of smell." Her voice was calm, measured, but her hands were shaking slightly as she taped the wrapping paper. I didn't push it. Didn't want to ruin Christmas. But the comment about seeing a doctor stuck with me. What if something was wrong with me? What if I was developing some kind of neurological issue that was distorting my perception? I made an appointment with my primary care physician for early January. Dr. Lisa Nguyen had been my doctor for 8 years. She was thorough, practical, and didn't suffer fools. I explained the situation, feeling ridiculous as I described smelling a perfume my wife insisted she wasn't wearing. "Let's rule out the obvious things," Dr. Nguyen said, making notes. "Any headaches? Vision changes? Memory problems?" No to all three. She did a neurological exam, had me follow her finger with my eyes, tested my reflexes, asked me to identify different scents from bottles she kept in her office. Everything came back normal. "Your sense of smell is fine, Julian," she said. "Probably better than average, actually. If you're consistently smelling something your wife says isn't there, either you're both perceiving the same scent differently, or something else is going on." Something else. The words hung in the air between us. I thanked her and left. January turned into February. The pattern continued. Every other weekend, I'd visit my parents. Every time I came home, Natalie would smell like that perfume. And every time I mentioned it, she'd deny it. But other things started happening too. Small things I might not have noticed if I wasn't already on edge. I'd come home and find Natalie had rearranged furniture. Just slightly. The couch moved a few inches to the left. The coffee table angled differently. The decorative pillows arranged in a pattern she never used. When I asked about it, she'd say she was redecorating, trying new layouts, keeping things fresh. Reasonable explanations. Always reasonable. Then there were the phone calls. I'd walk into a room and Natalie would be on her phone, and the moment she saw me, she'd end the call. "Wrong number," she'd say, or "spam call," or "just my mom, I'll call her back later." But her mom lived in Arizona, and they talked maybe once a month. The frequency didn't match. Neither did the look on Natalie's face when she ended those calls. Guilty. Afraid. I started to wonder if she was having an affair. The thought made me physically sick, but it was the only explanation that made sense. The perfume, the phone calls, the way she seemed different on the weekends I was gone. I didn't want to believe it. Natalie wasn't that person. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 6. We'd built a life together. But people changed. People lied. I decided to test my theory. In early March, I told Natalie I was visiting my parents for the weekend, like usual. But instead of driving to Silverton, I drove to a hotel about 20 miles away. Checked in under my name, spent Saturday watching TV and feeling like a terrible person for lying to my wife. Sunday morning, I drove home earlier than usual. Around 10 a.m. instead of my typical 6 p.m., I wanted to see if anything was different, if she'd be caught off guard. When I walked through the front door, Natalie was in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up, startled. "Julian? You're home early." Dad wasn't feeling well. Didn't need as much help as I thought. I lied. She nodded, but I could see tension in her shoulders. And there it was. That perfume. At 10 in the morning. Strong and unmistakable. "Why are you wearing perfume this early?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I always wear perfume," she said quickly. "No, you don't. Not on Sunday mornings when you're just hanging around the house." She set down her coffee mug, and I saw her hands were trembling. "Julian, what is this? Are you accusing me of something?" The question threw me. I wasn't ready to accuse her of anything. Didn't have proof. Just suspicions, and a scent that shouldn't have been there. "I'm not accusing you. I'm just confused. You're acting different. You smell different every time I come home from my parents' house. You're on your phone constantly. You're rearranging furniture. Something's going on, and I need you to tell me what it is." Natalie's face went pale. For a moment, I thought she was going to confess. Going to tell me everything. Instead, she started crying. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Can't do what?" "Natalie, talk to me." She shook her head, walked out of the kitchen, and locked herself in our bedroom. I stood there for 20 minutes, knocking on the door, asking her to let me in. She didn't respond. Eventually, I gave up and went to sleep on the couch. That night, I lay awake thinking about what to do. Confront her more directly? Hire a private investigator? Check her phone? Every option felt like a betrayal of trust, but so did ignoring what was clearly happening. Around 2 a.m., I made a decision. I was going to install a camera. Just one. Something small and discreet. I'd set it up before my next trip to my parents' house and see what happened when I was gone. The thought made me feel sick. I'd become the kind of person who spied on his wife. But I needed to know. The not knowing was worse than any truth could be. I found the camera online. A Nanny cam disguised as a digital alarm clock. It was $140, had motion detection, live streaming capability, and could store up to 64 hours of footage. I ordered it with overnight shipping. It arrived on Wednesday. That evening, while Natalie was out meeting a friend for dinner, I set it up on the bookshelf in our living room, angled it so it captured the couch, the front door, most of the room, synced it to an app on my phone, tested it to make sure the video quality was clear and the audio worked. Then I deleted the app from my phone's home screen and buried it in a folder where Natalie would never think to look. I felt like a criminal, like I was planting evidence instead of just trying to uncover truth. But I was committed now. The following weekend, I told Natalie I was visiting my parents again. She nodded, didn't ask questions, seemed almost relieved I'd be gone. I left Saturday morning, drove to Silverton, actually spent the day with my parents this time because the lying was eating me alive. That night, around 9 p.m., I opened the camera app on my phone. The living room was empty. Lights on, but no Natalie. I watched for 30 minutes. Nothing happened. I checked again at 11 before going to sleep at my parents' house. Still nothing. Sunday morning, I checked at 8 a.m. Natalie was on the couch reading a book. Normal. Completely normal. I started to feel stupid. Maybe there was no affair. Maybe I'd invented the whole thing in my paranoid mind. Then, at 10:30 a.m., the front door opened. A man walked in. I didn't recognize him. He was maybe 40, average height, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. Dark hair, glasses, completely unremarkable. He walked into the living room like he owned the place. Natalie stood up from the couch, and I expected her to hug him, kiss him, something that would confirm the affair I'd convinced myself was happening. Instead, she just stood there, frozen. The man said something I couldn't hear clearly through the audio. Natalie nodded. Then he walked to our bookshelf, pulled out a bottle of perfume I'd never seen before, and handed it to her. My stomach dropped. She took the bottle, opened it, and started spraying. Wrists, neck, behind her ears. The same methodical pattern I'd seen 1,000 times when she got ready for work. But this wasn't preparation for anything. This was compliance. The man sat down on the couch and gestured for her to sit next to him. She did, moving like a puppet on strings. That's when I realized I needed to get home. Immediately. I told my parents there was an emergency, apologized for leaving early, and drove back to Portland going 20 miles over the speed limit the entire way. I didn't call Natalie, didn't want to give her warning, didn't want the man to disappear before I could confront him. The drive took 90 minutes. I checked the camera app 3 times during the drive, pulling over to look because I couldn't focus on the road and the screen simultaneously. The man was still there. He and Natalie were talking. She looked terrified. When I pulled into our driveway at 1:15 p.m., his car was still parked on the street. A gray sedan, Oregon plates, nothing distinctive. I got out of my car and walked to the front door, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The moment I opened the door, I smelled the perfume. Overwhelming, suffocating. Natalie was sitting on the couch, and the man was standing near the window. They both turned to look at me. Natalie's face went white. "Julian," she whispered, "you're home early." "Who the hell are you?" I directed the question at the man. He smiled, actually smiled. "I'm an old friend of Natalie's, just catching up." "Get out of my house." My voice was shaking. "Julian, please." Natalie stood up. "Let me explain." "Explain what? Explain why there's a strange man in our house? Explain why you're wearing perfume you've been lying to me about for 8 months? Explain any of this, Natalie, because I'm about 2 seconds from calling the police." The man's smile faded. "That won't be necessary. I'll go. But Natalie, we'll talk later." He walked past me toward the door, and every instinct told me to grab him, to not let him leave. But I let him go. Heard his car start, heard him drive away. Then I turned to my wife. "Start talking, right now." Natalie collapsed onto the couch, shaking so hard she could barely get words out. "His name is Philip Dorsey. We grew up together, in foster care." I knew Natalie had been in the system as a kid. She'd told me early in our relationship that her biological parents lost custody when she was 7, that she'd bounced between foster homes and group homes until she aged out at 18. She rarely talked about it, said it was a painful time she preferred to leave in the past. I'd respected that. Never pushed. "Okay, and?" I sat down across from her, trying to keep my voice level. "He was in one of the homes I was in, when I was 14, for about 8 months. She was crying now, full-body sobs that made her shoulders shake. "Natalie, I need you to tell me what's happening. Why is he here? Why the perfume?" She looked up at me, and the expression on her face was pure devastation. "He found me 6 years ago, right after we got married, contacted me through social media, said he'd been looking for me, said he missed me, said we'd been close when we were kids." "Were you close?" "No." The word came out as a whisper. "He was 17 when I was 14. He was one of the older kids in the home. And he hurt me, Julian. He hurt me in ways I've spent 20 years trying to forget." My blood went cold. "He assaulted you." She nodded, unable to speak. "Jesus, Natalie, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you block him? Call the police? Why is he in our house?" "Because he won't leave me alone." The words burst out of her. "I blocked him 6 years ago, changed my phone number, locked down all my social media, but he kept finding ways to contact me. He'd show up at my work, at coffee shops I went to, outside our house. He'd send messages through fake accounts. He knows where we live. He knows your name. He knows where you work. He threatened to hurt you if I didn't do what he said. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What does he make you do? He comes over when you're gone, every other weekend when you visit your parents. He makes me spray that perfume because it's the same one I wore when I was 14, when it happened. He makes me sit with him, talk to him, listen to him talk about the past like it was some beautiful thing instead of a nightmare. He touches my face, my hair, nothing more than that. But Julian, I can't breathe when he's here. I can't think. I just freeze. How long has this been happening? The visits? 8 months. He escalated after I got a restraining order last year. I didn't tell you about the restraining order because I thought I could handle it myself. Thought if I just got the legal protection, he'd leave me alone. But the day after it was served, he showed up at the house when you were at work. Said if I didn't drop it and let him visit, he'd make sure you had an accident. Something that would look random. He was so calm when he said it, Julian. So matter of fact. And I believed him. I stood up, pacing the room because I couldn't sit still. We're calling the police, right now. No, Julian, please. She grabbed my arm. He said if I ever told anyone, if I ever involved the police, he'd hurt you. I can't risk that. I can't. Natalie, you can't keep living like this. He's controlling you, terrorizing you. This is stalking, harassment, possibly worse. I know. Her voice was hollow. But I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. The restraining order made it worse. Blocking him doesn't work. Moving won't work because he always finds me. I'm trapped. I pulled out my phone. I have video footage from a camera I installed in the living room. I have proof of him being here without your permission. That violates any restraining order you had, even if you dropped it. She looked at me in shock. You've been recording us? I thought you were having an affair. I'm sorry. I know that's horrible, but Natalie, I was desperate. And now I'm glad I did it because we have evidence. The next few hours were a blur. I called the Portland Police Department's non-emergency line and explained the situation. They sent 2 officers to take a statement. Officer David Huang, 12 years on the force, and Officer Rebecca Mills, 8 years. They were professional, calm, asked detailed questions. Natalie told them everything. The history with Philip Dorsey, the contact 6 years ago, the restraining order she'd gotten and then dropped under duress, the threats he'd made, the forced visits. I showed them the video footage from the nanny cam. They watched it, made notes, asked if they could take a copy. I sent it to the email address Officer Huang provided. This is stalking, harassment, and possibly violation of a previous restraining order, Officer Mills said. We'll need to file a report and forward this to our detective division. Do you feel safe staying here tonight? No, Natalie said immediately. Is there somewhere you can go? Family? Friends? We decided to stay with my parents. Packed bags while the officers waited, loaded Biscuit into the car, and drove to Silverton. I called my parents on the way to explain, keeping it vague. Family emergency. Would explain more when we arrived. They didn't ask questions, just said to come. When we got there, my mom took one look at Natalie's face and wrapped her in a hug. My dad pulled me aside. What happened? I told him everything. He listened, his expression darkening with each detail. That man needs to be arrested. Working on it. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Angela Price, Portland Police Department, 19 years in law enforcement, specializing in stalking and domestic violence cases. She wanted to meet with us, go over everything in detail, build a case. We drove back to Portland and met her at the station. Detective Price was in her mid-40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the video footage, read through the old restraining order documentation Natalie had kept, took a detailed statement about every interaction Natalie had with Philip Dorsey over the past 6 years. This is a clear pattern of stalking and harassment, Detective Price said. The threats against your husband constitute intimidation. The forced visits are harassment at minimum. And if we can prove he violated the original restraining order before it was dropped, we can pursue criminal charges for that as well. What happens now? I asked. We locate Mr. Dorsey and bring him in for questioning. Depending on what he says and what additional evidence we gather, we'll pursue charges. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you file for a new restraining order. I know the last one didn't work, but this time we have video evidence. Documentation. A pattern. It strengthens your case. Natalie nodded numbly. We filed for the restraining order that afternoon. Temporary order granted immediately. Full hearing scheduled for 2 weeks out. Detective Price called me 3 days later. They'd located Philip Dorsey. He'd been arrested and charged with felony stalking, harassment, and intimidation. Bail was set at $50,000. He posted it within 24 hours. I felt sick knowing he was out there somewhere. But at least now there was a legal record. Documentation. A paper trail. The restraining order hearing was on a Friday morning. We showed up at the courthouse with Detective Price and a lawyer Natalie had hired, Karen Sloan, 15 years specializing in restraining orders and domestic violence cases. Philip Dorsey showed up with his own lawyer. I saw him across the courtroom and felt rage I'd never experienced before. He looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. You'd never know what he was capable of just by looking at him. The judge, Honorable Thomas Brennan, reviewed the evidence, the video footage, the police reports, Natalie's testimony about the years of harassment. Philip's lawyer tried to argue that the visits were consensual, that Natalie had invited him. Karen Sloan destroyed that argument with the video showing Natalie's fear, her body language, the way she complied like someone under duress. Judge Brennan granted a 5-year restraining order. Philip Dorsey was ordered to stay at least 500 yards away from Natalie, from me, from our home, and from Natalie's workplace. Any contact would result in immediate arrest. But the restraining order didn't stop him. 2 weeks later, Natalie got an email from a fake account. "This isn't over. I'll always find you." She forwarded it to Detective Price immediately. They tracked the IP address to a library computer Philip had used, added it to the evidence file. The following week, a package arrived at our house. No return address. Inside was a bottle of that perfume, the same one he'd made Natalie wear. And a note. "You can't keep me away." We called the police. They collected the package as evidence. Detective Price told us they were building a case for violation of the restraining order, but they needed more concrete proof it was him. The emails could theoretically be sent by anyone using his identity. The package had no fingerprints. I started carrying a panic button app on my phone. Detective Price had recommended it. One press would alert 911 and send our location. Natalie had one too. We installed a full security system at the house. Cameras on every door, motion sensors, alarms. I started taking different routes to work every day, checking my rearview mirror constantly. We were living in fear, and Philip Dorsey knew it. That was the point. 3 weeks after the restraining order was granted, I was leaving school at 4:30 p.m. when I saw him. Philip Dorsey, standing in the parking lot next to my car. 500 yards. He was supposed to stay 500 yards away. I was maybe 100 feet from him. I pulled out my phone and called 911 while simultaneously hitting the panic button app. "This is Julian Reeves. There's a man violating a restraining order. He's in the parking lot of Lincoln High School. I need police here now." Philip saw me on the phone and didn't run, just stood there, smiling, like this was a game. Police arrived within 4 minutes. School security had already approached him, told him to leave. He'd refused. Officer Huang was one of the responding officers. He recognized me from the original report. "Mr. Reeves, is this the individual from the restraining order?" "Yes, Philip Dorsey." They arrested him on the spot. Violation of a restraining order. This time bail was set at $100,000. He posted it again. I couldn't understand how he had that kind of money. Detective Price told me he worked as a freelance IT consultant, made decent money. No wife, no kids, lived alone in an apartment across town. His entire life seemed to revolve around tormenting Natalie. The trial for the stalking charges was scheduled for 3 months out. In the meantime, Philip violated the restraining order 2 more times, once by sending a letter to Natalie's parents' house in Arizona. Her mom forwarded it to Detective Price, once by showing up at a coffee shop where Natalie was meeting a client for her vintage clothing business. He sat 3 tables away, staring at her until she called the police. Each time, he was arrested. Each time, he posted bail. The pattern was clear. He wasn't going to stop. The trial finally happened in August, 6 months after this nightmare had started. The prosecution presented the video evidence, the emails, the packages, the repeated restraining order violations. Natalie testified. I testified. Detective Price testified. Philip's defense was that he'd been trying to reconnect with an old friend who was important to him, that he hadn't meant any harm, that the relationship had been consensual when they were younger. Karen Sloan stood up during cross-examination and asked him directly, "Mr. Dorsey, Natalie was 14 years old when you were 17. You were both in foster care. You had a position of power as an older kid in the home. Did you engage in sexual contact with her?" "We had a relationship," he said. "She was a willing participant. A 14-year-old cannot consent to a 17-year-old in a position of authority. What you're describing is sexual assault of a minor." His lawyer objected. The judge sustained it. But the jury had heard enough. They deliberated for 6 hours, came back with a guilty verdict on all counts: felony stalking, harassment, intimidation, and multiple counts of violating a restraining order. Sentencing was set for a month later. Philip Dorsey was remanded into custody. No bail this time. I watched them handcuff him and lead him out of the courtroom, and I felt something release in my chest. Relief. Actual relief. Sentencing day came in September. Judge Brennan reviewed the case, the evidence, the pattern of escalating behavior. He sentenced Philip Dorsey to 8 years in prison with a possibility of parole after 5. Upon release, he'd be required to register as a sex offender based on the assault when Natalie was a minor. A permanent restraining order was issued. If he ever contacted Natalie again after his release, he'd face additional criminal charges. Judge Brennan looked directly at Philip Dorsey and said, "Your actions have caused immeasurable harm to the victim in this case. You've demonstrated a pattern of manipulation, control, and violence that cannot be tolerated in a civilized society. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the damage you've done and to seek help for whatever compels you to terrorize another human being." We walked out of the courthouse into bright September sunshine. Natalie was crying, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. We went home to our house, to Biscuit, to our life. That night, Natalie threw away the bottle of perfume Philip had sent. We burned the note together in our fireplace. Then she went through her closet and found every item of clothing she associated with him, with that time in foster care, with the fear she'd carried for 20 years. We drove to a donation center and left it all there. "I don't want any of it," she said. I want to start over. We can start over, I told her. We can build something new. The next few months were about healing. Natalie started seeing a therapist, Dr. Michaela Sutton, who specialized in trauma and PTSD. The sessions were hard. Natalie would come home exhausted, emotionally drained, sometimes angry at the world, and sometimes just sad. But slowly, gradually, she started to reclaim pieces of herself she'd lost. We went to couples counseling too, with Dr. Raymond Fletcher, who helped us navigate the breach of trust around the nanny cam, the secrets Natalie had kept, the paranoia I'd developed. You both acted out of fear, Dr. Fletcher told us. Fear makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. The question now is whether you can rebuild trust despite that fear. We could. It took time. It took honesty. It took Natalie letting me in on the parts of her past she'd always kept hidden. It took me learning to communicate instead of assuming the worst. 1 year after Philip Dorsey was sentenced, Natalie and I drove to the coast for a weekend. We stayed in a small bed and breakfast, walked on the beach, ate fresh seafood, and didn't talk about the past. We talked about the future instead, about maybe starting a family, about Natalie expanding her vintage clothing business, about me potentially moving to a different school with better funding and fewer students in crisis, about normal things, good things. On our last night there, we sat on the beach watching the sunset. I never thought I'd feel safe again, Natalie said quietly. But I do now, because of you. Because you didn't give up on me even when I couldn't tell you what was happening. I'll never give up on you, I said. I just wish I'd known sooner. I wish you'd felt safe enough to tell me. I was ashamed, and I was scared he'd hurt you. I couldn't risk that. He can't hurt us anymore. She nodded. I know. It still feels surreal sometimes, like I'm going to wake up and he'll be standing in our living room again. He won't be. He's in prison. He's going to stay in prison. And when he gets out, we'll be ready. Will we? Yes, because we're not running anymore. We're not hiding. We're living our lives, and that's the best revenge possible. 3 months ago, Natalie bought new perfume, something light and fresh that smells nothing like the floral scent Philip made her wear. She wears it every day now, reclaiming the simple act of choosing her own scent. Last month, we found out she's pregnant, 12 weeks along. We're cautiously excited, terrified, but excited. We know there are no guarantees, but we're choosing hope over fear. And yesterday, I took down the nanny cam. We don't need it anymore. We have security cameras outside the house, but inside is our space, our sanctuary, a place where we both feel safe. I asked Natalie if she wanted me to delete the footage from that day, the day I saw Philip in our living room, the day everything changed. No, she said. Keep it. Not to watch it, but as a reminder that we survived, that we fought back, that we won. So I saved it to an external hard drive and locked it in our safe. Evidence of what we endured. Proof that sometimes the monsters are real, but they can be defeated. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.